What's up, you guys? So the question on everyone's mind all around the world right now is, what is going on this planet? I'm going to tell you. And I'm going to tell you with near certainty that it is at least the plan of a certain contingency of people that are very widely misunderstood. Mainstream narratives around this subject are extremely distorted because the information is mostly coming from the right-wing fundamentalists, and a lot of people that are newly escaping the matrix, I think, don't understand that that's where a lot of this stuff is emanating from, and so they're not suspicious of it. So I want to point something out here. You know, there's been rumors of this intent to depopulate to a dramatic extent, you know, pretty extensive depopulation. And in order to facilitate the advent of a very small sort of utopian, highly automated, enlightened, small society. And the idea basically is that we needed the propulsion created by this massive number of people, this huge population, in order to create all the plastic trinkets and to create all of these sort of unnecessary economies to kind of drive the whole engine forward. And suddenly that is no longer necessary. And so through a combination of, I think, like just common sense observation and decades of research and study, including, you know, formerly secret, I can't reach it from here, or I'd grab it and show you guys, formerly secret Masonic books written by 33rd degree Masons and stuff. I started to notice that it seemed like the New World Order plan and the players involved, some of them were kind of consistent with the popular narratives, but there were some glaring inconsistencies. And so one way to think about this is, you know, there's this eerie similarity between what we're observing and these rumors of this population reduction in order to facilitate this very small sort of utopian population. Kind of sounds like the 1,000 years of Christ predicted by the Bible, or 1,000 years of peace predicted by the Bible, right? And I think what is outraging a lot of people is that they have this perception that it's like this evil satanic clique that is doing this, and somehow this utopia is coming into existence, but they're not invited, right? It's going to be other people. And so that, of course, raises a lot of questions in my mind. You know, if their God is supposedly in charge of all this, you know, it seems like what is predicted in the Bible, long story short, is basically going to happen, but it's not faith in Jesus that's going to get you in the door. What's going to get you into the door is paying attention to the signs, symbols, hints, and clues, right? My feeling is that, you know, I'm not saying that there aren't evil cliques in Hollywood. I mean, there's weirdos everywhere on earth. For sure that in powerful places, you know, we know psychopaths rise to the top of pyramids. That's not hard to understand. But the classical Illuminati, for example, definitely had in mind the liberation of mankind by Illuminism and the advancement of the sciences and all this kind of stuff. Basically an enlightened society versus a religious society. And that's where this perception that it was evil comes from, because the right-wing Christians got wind of this and they went, get rid of religion, that's Satan. So anyways, deviating a little bit, what I'm getting at here, and I'm trying to keep it short because I'm doing a music stream after this, Pink Floyd, most of Dark Side of the Moon, and it's just going to be kind of a teaser because I haven't perfected it yet. So it's not the real show, which will probably be tomorrow night. But I encourage all you guys to join me, and also to hit the like button, share, subscribe, consider supporting us by joining Patreon and the options in the chat. But what I'm getting at here is that it's pretty obvious that they control the flow of information, and they have restricted it to a large degree. I've been affected by it. You know, there are similar channels I've been able to discover that seem to also have been affected by it. So I'm not saying that there isn't some, you know, negative consequences to all of this, but I think it's fair to say that if they didn't want you to know not to eat GMOs, you probably wouldn't know they exist. You wouldn't know that Bill Gates is growing all of the food for McDonald's. Like literally every vegetable they use is made by Bill Gates, who has openly talked about this necessity for population reduction. So what I'm and then, you know, the Bitcoin thing, they have allowed it to be accessible long enough to allow people that are paying attention potentially to make some money. So the way it appears to me, and the way this plan was actually explained, even in the Bible for people that are paying attention, because it was written by mystery adepts who have foreseen this sort of stage in the evolution of mankind since at least ancient Greece. It doesn't take woo to do that either, by the way. If they didn't want you to have access to the information, you wouldn't have access to it. So to my eyes, it looks like they're trying to let the most evolved, sophisticated, intelligent people make it through the transition deliberately. And if you doubt that, riddle me this, Batman. Why is it that the sheep are the ones that are getting the experimental, that thing, if it really is designed to get rid of a lot of people? And then ask yourself, if that hasn't occurred to you, what else might you be missing? Because that's a major glaring inconsistency for most of the people that take that position. Why are they going after the sheep then? And it's not a matter of like not having compassion or saying that I agree entirely with this whole process or whatever, but the way I see it, it's kind of like being pushed off a cliff. You guys have already been pushed off the cliff. So you can yell, damn it, this is unfair, all you want, but you're still just gonna fall off the cliff. Like there's, it's kind of like sex with Kobe Bryant. Well, he's dead, I shouldn't have said that. Is that the right guy, or was it not? That might have even been the wrong basketball player. I don't know, but you guys know what I was gonna say. The old Chappelle yarn about whoever that was. Anyways, you've been pushed off the cliff, so you can whine about how it's unfair, or you can sprout wings. And so I really felt like it would be helpful of me to offer that a little bit of adjustment in our perception of what's happening in the world can really offer us a different path and a different trajectory and a greater level of understanding, is always helpful, because it may not eliminate the problems, and it certainly will not make you feel 100% better, but at least you can kind of understand what's happening. A lot of people have asked me if these leaders, they have children, and they're able to do all these super evil things, and this is a little bit off of the original topic, but the psychologists tell us that 80 or 90% of what we do is an automatic or subconscious process. And what I would call that is a feedback loop with our environment, right? Because that's what informs those aspects of ourself, experience and necessity, really, and how we respond to the environment and the history of what has cultivated us. And so if you consider this, I know I've used this analogy way too many times, but a coal mine, and there's little bits of diamonds everywhere, it's all the pressure and opposition that crushes that coal down into those gemstones that actually have value. And like it or not, that is the universal law expressing itself, and that is the way it's going to work on the human race as well. And when you look around throughout the mass of humanity, how many Bob Dylans, Eminems, Albert Einsteins, how many of these people do you see relative to the overall mass? And 150 years ago, Aleister Crowley wrote in the introduction to the Book of the Law, society only moves by the light of genius. The herd will be destroyed in mass. And so another aspect of this to consider is that regardless of your position on global warming, that's really neither here nor there, because there are enough other environmental threats that are occurring to put us in a questionable existential position, right? I mean, our survival is definitely uncertain, whether it's at our own hands. Well, either way, another expression of this, I think I just discovered, is that space travel may be limited because of the amount of trash. I actually saw I can't remember what they used to illuminate all the pieces of trash around the earth. But, we're exuding so much garbage that the space around the earth is becoming an impenetrable cloud of garbage. The oceans have, plastic large enough to, last time I checked, it was the size of France. You know what I mean? The rivers were lighting on fire in the 1970s, In the 1970s, rivers are lighting on fire. What are they like now? You know, I live in the Amazon rainforest where a lot of the rivers have almost no fish in them anymore, like none. You know, I used to watch, here in Peru it's a little better, but in Ecuador, I watch the Quechua throw their nets all day long and catch nothing, like literally nothing. So you know what I mean? I do not think it's possible to sustain this mass of humans. And furthermore, and some of you might not like me for this, but I don't really see any reason to. You know, what I was saying about the people at the top and the pressure and the fact that every story needs an antagonist, I think that they are operating from a subconscious place, which in a way is like saying that they're actually just instruments of nature. You know, we have this idea that things that man does are unnatural, right? That we can somehow go against the will of the universe, that we can override natural laws and do things that are out of sync with the order of creation. But I don't think that's correct. I think it's much more correct to view mankind as another extension of nature, even if we create garbage and chemicals and stuff. So, you know, when I see someone like Vladimir Putin or Donald Trump or Joe Biden or whoever, I don't care who it is, the South Korean guy, use whoever you want as an example, I see them all pretty much the same way. It may be true that what they do is evil subjectively, maybe even objectively, but it serves a role and a purpose in the universe, otherwise it wouldn't happen. You know, this is one of the tenets, whether you accept this or not, of scientific illuminism and hermeticism, you know, the scientific protocol or the ontological, you know, perspective of the Illuminati and high-level masonry and stuff, is that there is a law of necessity and nothing, literally nothing happens in the universe that doesn't have to happen, especially on like a structural or and on the level of like natural law. You know, things are as they are because they must be in order to sustain this type of creation. So there's nothing out of order. Bill Gates is just as necessary as a monarch butterfly in his role that he's playing on this earth. And you know, and again, I think people, one of the big traps is that people get so stuck going like, oh, this is evil and wrong, look what they're doing. It's like, no, if you notice what's happening, don't just stand there and talk about it, figure out how to react to it. And that's what almost no one is doing from what I can see, you know, at least not in the ways that I would consider to be meaningful and productive, you know. We need to be starting communities. We need to be, most importantly, communicating with each other and coagulating into meaningful groups, you know? Because just because you can understand that this is all part of a coherent process that actually makes sense, regardless of whether some of it's evil or whatever, it doesn't mean that you don't compartmentalize and say, okay, well, that's happening and it makes sense, but I'm not part of that aspect of it. You know, and so it's like the trick is to rise above it all, observe it from the perspective of a higher mind, and then zip back into your human point of view. I mean, that's basically the transcendental process in a nutshell, or enlightenment. You know, you realize that the shadow aspect will always be there. You know, the goal is, in a sense, not really to rid the earth of evil. Look throughout human history. Has it ever been different? It's always been the same shit show to some extent, you know. There will never really be a period where there's absolutely no conflict and there's no, you know what I mean? The real objective of this revolution prepared for by the ages, that it has for its aim the amelioration of mankind from superstition and despotism and slavery and exploitation and bigotry and all of these other things. But it can only do that by raising the floor. There will always be this relative, you know, relativity, the duality, the opposing antinomies that are interacting to create everything, you know, that's always going to be there. But we can raise the floor. And we all just need to commit to fulfilling our role and taking our position. And one of the most encouraging things that I've encountered in the last couple of months, yeah, homeostasis in a new climate, that's a great way to put it. one of the most important or encouraging things that I've encountered in the last couple of months. I don't know if it was actually Tucker Carlson talking to Lex Friedman, I think. And actually, I don't know which one of them said it, but they were talking about how the Goliath, this monster machine that we've created that seems so indestructible and impenetrable and threatening and almost all powerful at this point, is creating its own David. Was it David and Goliath, and the giant was Goliath, right? And David was the little guy, yeah. So it is alienating all the most intelligent, the highest geniuses. I don't know if you guys have noticed this, but really the best geniuses always seem to have this sort of enlightened quality. It's like they're connected to some divine coordinates, So I don't think they tend to align with like governments and corporations. They're much more likely to be on our side. And I have, both publicly available confirmation that you guys can find yourself, and also just things that I've seen in my private life with my own eyes that confirm that that's true. So right now it has been my assumption for 20 years, and it seems like even people like Tucker Carlson are starting to realize that this is happening. This force of how do you say, it's like pushing everything out to the edge. When you purge, it's like a purge, they're like purging all of the best elements out of the collective. And that represents both opportunity and potential crisis, because they are causing us to isolate ourselves. In fact, before I go any further, since we're on the subject of isolation, I found this wonderful podcast earlier that I had never heard of before, and unfortunately I closed the window. So just give me a second to open that back up and find my history and pull that up for you guys, because it's definitely worth hearing how this guy describes this. But he's more or less talking about how they're doing exactly what I'm describing. They're alienating the best geniuses, the most moral people, the most insightful, which, as I was saying, on the one hand makes it easier to round us up, and on the other hand makes it easier for us to kind of coagulate into groups. Oh, where is this? I also found a really interesting video about carbon 2+, just like a totally symmetrical molecule. There it is. And also we're going to do another Michael Levin talk, maybe tomorrow or Monday, that's much better than the last one. The title is The Universe Inside: Intelligence from Cells to Galaxies. By the way, one more time, if you guys want to see this content continue, revenue from this channel has taken another massive dip in the last month. I don't like it very much, and I rely on you guys to make sure that doesn't happen. So please consider joining the Patreon. All right, so there's the thing. Now I got to do screen sharing with you guys, get myself out of the way, and I think we're good here.
It seems like there is one critical difference, though, which is that people under hypnosis generally won't cause harm to other people. Is that correct?
They will not. They will continue to stick to the same ethical rules, ethical principles as they use when they are awake. That's true.
So you have to rewrite the ethical rule. The ethical rules have to be rewritten underneath them in a sort of public fashion.
Isn't there something to do with dehumanization and creating a group that doesn't warrant the ethical rule? Because ethical rules.
That's rewriting. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Rewriting the ethical landscape is a better way of putting it. Maybe.
Yeah. Like you still have the same rules, but you're like, but these people who are anti-vaxxers, or these people who are, abortion activists
or Jews
or whatever. They don't
or
deserve
anti-communist
the
or
Yeah.
in the
Yes,
case of the Soviet Union.
What's typical for mass formation is that within the mass, people stick to extremely strict ethical rules.
So what I should have given you guys some context. What they're talking about is mass formation psychosis, which is incredibly real. I didn't have a name for it, but it started happening to me in 2020 because I would make videos where I was like, you know what, you guys. In fact, the only stream I really had to like caught fire. I had like 20,000 viewers or something. I was talking about this, and I got demonetized right afterwards. And I, for some reason, I never put that together until literally just this moment, which seems incredibly dumb of me. But that just reminded me because I was thinking, hey, Mr. Charles was there. I got word yesterday, for those of you that have been in this community for a long time, Mr. Charles is no longer with us, which is extremely sad. He was a longtime supporter and a great guy, and I don't have all the details yet. I'll talk more about that when I get them, maybe even do a little tribute. Some of us in this community got to know him personally, as in like in person, and so it just reminded me that I knew he was there, and I almost said, Mr. Charles, didn't you see that? And then I remembered that he's not going to be there. So, yeah. So mass formation psychosis in 2020, because I was talking a lot about how, Donald Trump is not good. Joe Biden is not good. Like, none of it's good. It's all fake. None of it's real. If anyone gets anywhere near the White House, if they're not under the complete control, they will not happen in the first place. They don't like to have to kill their puppets, And when, what was his name? John F. Kennedy, that was a mess. So they don't want to have to do that, and it's just much easier to just not even let them get in there in the first place. In my opinion, Donald Trump is playing a very specific role. He's being set up to be a dictator. They have to consolidate the parties into one side, and this is what the demonization of the left is about. And don't even give me that crap about, isn't the left doing a great job of demonizing themselves? If you think that people are coming up with all this crazy shit on their own, you're out of your mind. It's all being fed to them in order to create the conflict, and you know that. So don't even go there. Mass formation psychosis has to do with basically scaring the shit out of people and sort of reformatting their ethical system. And when I started to make that kind of content and post things on Facebook and stuff, I was blown away at family members deserting me and people like just and also if I said Trump bad, Biden bad. If it was a Biden supporter, they would say, oh, well, you're a closet Trump supporter then. That kind of like just black and white inability to process nuance. So at any rate, we'll probably get a lot more into what mass formation psychosis is because it's a huge problem and it's something that is happening more and more. So let's get back into this.
So people even show an ethical awareness that they didn't show before within the mass, but towards the people who are outside the mass, who do not buy into the mass narrative, the masses typically become radically cruel, as if it is an ethical duty, just because they are convinced that the people who do not buy into the narrative show no solidarity, lack citizenship, and so on, and consequently should be isolated, stigmatized, and ultimately eliminated. That's what happens. Unless, that's extremely important, unless if the people that do not go along with the mass formation, that do not buy into the narrative, if these people continue to speak out, the mass formation will never become so deep that people start to commit cruelties. That's extremely important. In the 19th century, Gustave Le Bon remarked this already. He said, the people who are not into the process of mass formation will never be capable to wake up the masses. That's almost impossible. But he said, if these people continue to speak out in a quiet and human way, the mass formation will not go so deep that the masses or become convinced that it is their ethical duty to commit cruelties to the people who don't go along with them. So that's extremely important, and that's exactly the reason why it was shortly after 1930, when the opposition was silent in the Soviet Union, that Stalin started to commit his cruelties.
Oh man, that's so relevant to right now with the free speech movements and the fact that all of our discussion in the world right now is linked to these internet systems that are controlled by very few people, unfortunately, or at least very few corporations. How can we spare ourselves that fate? Do you have any insight on that? Like, how do we keep our speech free and open? How do we keep these platforms from stopping us from talking about these? I agree. Like, if we can't talk about stuff, it's just a powder keg, you know. There's nothing can work out if we can't talk.
No, indeed. So, well, the first thing we have to make sure of is that we are really aware of the fact that it has dramatic consequences if we stop to speak out. So that's clear. In the Soviet Union, 1930, people stopped and the cruelty started. In Nazi Germany in 1935, the opposition was silenced, or at least the opposition went underground because they thought it was too dangerous to continue to speak out. And in less than 6 months, the cruelty started in Nazi Germany. So we have to be aware of that, and then we have to do everything to continue to speak out. We should never be discouraged by the fact that we are not capable of waking people up, of convincing people. That's not.
I love that. Yeah, it's a really good point.
We will not be able to convince them because these rational arguments, for the reasons that I just mentioned, just don't work anymore. But what we should realize is that it is not because people don't wake up that our speech is without effect. Not at all. If we speak, we will constantly disturb the hypnosis. We will constantly disturb the process of mass formation, and we will prevent that both the leaders and the masses become so fanatically convinced of their own ideology that I think, as I said, it is their ethical duty to destroy everyone that does not go along with the ideology. So I repeat this time and time again. In my book, I explain it in detail, psychologically, what we should do and why we should do it. And I'm convinced that this will be decisive to determine whether or not the group that does not go along with the masses, with the crowd, will be destroyed or not. Strangely enough. It's a strong claim, I'm aware of that, but don't underestimate the blindness that can seize a mass or a crowd, and the fanatic conviction that can seize a crowd, even in our times, if there is no dissonant voice anymore. So, well.
But the top-down structures are working so actively to shut down dissident voices across the world. That's really scary to me.
But even then, what's happening is that people are cloistering themselves into social networks that are specific to a certain kind of speech, right? So it used to be that everybody was on Twitter. Twitter started banning people, and now people are on, Getter or Parler or all of these places. And you go and you look, and in the same way that Twitter is super left, these spaces are super right. And it seems like whereas in a totalitarian society like the Soviet Union or Nazi Germany, there was one central word that came out. But here, it doesn't seem like there's one central word. I can't model it as being just one. There's a momentary window where, the Democrats are in charge and they have Twitter, but it's going to flip. We're going to have an election 4 years from now, or 2 years from now. It's going to go upside down.
Will that serve as a check and balance, or is it going to just make a war of two different totalitarian?
So, and that's where people like this, God love them. In fact, I would love to be a guest or have them as guests. I'll definitely be reaching out to these folks to see if I can arrange that, because it seems like they're my people, particularly the psychologist. I'm assuming that he's a psychologist. it's really comforting for me to see that there are more people like that coming out into the world, because, I'm consistently hearing from people in this community, like I'm the only voice of my type or whatever. And although in a way that's kind of flattering, and then I also think that it's also got to do with the algorithm burying people like me. It's scary too. And those guys are showing me that it's not entirely true. There are some people. But what I'm pointing out here is, you notice how the two doctors that were together, the Demystify Psi guys, they actually believe in the system to some extent still. They think Democrat and Republican is two different things. And I'm here to tell you it is absolutely not. It never was. It was never intended to be. It's never been real. It's just a pacifier for people, and it's a way for them to keep people divided. It's not, and it is true that when it goes blue, the pendulum swings a little bit this way, and then when it goes red, it swings a little bit that way. But they keep it doing this, so it really never changes anything. It just, whatever they do in this direction, it is pulled back shortly after in the other direction. So the whole point of it is to just keep things exactly on the same trajectory, which is the consolidation of wealth at the top of the pyramid, and similar objectives to that. So let's see, we have just a few more minutes, because I am determined to make this music stream solid tonight, and I need to go over the guitar parts a little bit. That's going to be at 9:00. So, and someone in the comments said scary. It's not really exactly true. I mean, it is potentially. But as that guy was saying, as long as there are people that are sort of conscientious objectors to the entire hypnosis, that are creating interference patterns, that are creating doubt in the minds of the zombie masses, get Luna, psst, get out of the toilet, go, psst, psst, psst. Pitbull's drinking out of the toilet, getting on my nerves. As long as there is that interference pattern, as long as there's some dissonance to shake things up and keep people from becoming too confident, they won't probably tear us limb from limb. And I don't know if you guys have noticed, but they definitely have turned up the volume on the propaganda machine. The needle is buried, and they're really doing a great job of convincing people. One of these narratives that the right really likes to throw out is that there are all these lefties that are deliberately destroying their own country or something. It doesn't make any sense. You can't answer qui bono, which is always the question that you need to answer if you're going to make some kind of accusation like that. This is always what the right has said about they're destroying America, and it's like the concept that the right has of what America is never even been real. So you can't destroy something that didn't even ever exist, It was just a concept. But yeah, so you guys, I really appreciate you, and I hope that you'll consider joining the Patreon or supporting in some other way, because like that guy said, as long as there are voices that are creating some doubt in the minds of the hypnotized zombie masses, they will not tear us limb from limb. So, and all of you out there continue to speak out and to gather and to join my Discord and other Discords, and, you just have to challenge everyone. Don't be afraid of being ostracized. Don't be afraid of being isolated, because that's better than the alternative fate. And I've even been suggesting that maybe we should go underground, but you heard the psychologist, maybe that's not the best thing. Ultimately, as I said in the beginning of this, I don't think it's going to matter much, and I don't think it's supposed to matter much. Unless there is a major miracle of some kind, or some out of left field crazy shift in circumstances, the population reduction and then the smaller quasi-utopian society is pretty much definitely going to come. I mean, this has been in the works for thousands of years, and If not, you could really say the whole entire biological evolution of the Earth has had this for its end goal, which is something that if you continue to watch my Michael Levin reaction videos, I guess, you will start to understand how these cognitive light cones dictate things to the extent that you could call it fate. So if it sounds wild to say that this little automated AI-run utopian, much smaller population, that sounds like it's too wild to think that that's been the goal of the Earth's ecosphere forever. You learn about these cognitive light cones, you might not think that anymore. So again, thank you guys so much for spending this time with me. Please hit the like button, share, subscribe, consider joining our Patreon or supporting us through PayPal, Zelle, Cash App, or whatever, because if my voice goes away, they're going to rip you limb from limbs in the streets, according to that psychologist. So cheers, guys.